Thank you, Hillary. When I started medical school at the University of Minnesota, I had no idea that I would become a psychiatrist. Then I learned about the brain and the frontiers of neuroscience, and the first time I talked to patients with mental illness, I was hooked. I enjoyed listening to their stories and trying to understand what was going on with them. At the time I chose psychiatry as a career, I had not had any symptoms of mental illness. I moved to Boston to start my internship in a hospital emergency room. I was working nights. Pretty soon, shifting from days to nights, I had trouble sleeping, and it seemed like I wasn't sleeping at all. Then I started feeling like I was stressed out all the time, and I couldn't smile. The next month, I moved to the medicine ward. I was working on the medical ward, but working might be too strong a word because my brain had stopped working. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't make simple decisions. I didn't feel sad or depressed, but I felt like there was a shock wave all the time, that I couldn't, I felt like I was a failure. I was failing at my intended profession. So I went to my supervisor and said, I want to quit. He said, Rick, you're depressed, and go see a psychiatrist in your training program. But what I had wasn't something that could be treated or cured. I was a failure. So I went home before going to see the psychiatrist, and it just sort of hit me. I was quitting my job. My life was ruined. It felt like the ground was cracking and falling away beneath my feet. I found a bottle of paint thinner, and I thought about drinking it, but then I read the warning label. And then I took a butcher knife, and I held it over my chest with the point over my heart, and I started to press in. But I'm a coward, and I'm also squeamish. But I think what really saved me was that in the depths of my depression, I knew I would fail at anything I attempted. So I just gave up. I went to see the psychiatrist, and after a few questions, he said, Rick, you're depressed. And then he asked, almost as an afterthought, you're not having any thoughts of suicide, are you? I said, well, maybe a little. I did not want to tell this man who would become a supervisor, a colleague, how bad off I was. I was ashamed. So he gave me a prescription for antidepressant and sent me home. My family wanted to intervene, and so their idea was my dad would fly out from Minneapolis and talk some sense back into me and get me back to work. So when he saw me, he realized I needed more help than he could provide. And the next plan B was that, well, let's take Rick back to Minneapolis, where his psychiatry advisor is, and he'll talk some sense into him. In the next day, waiting to fly back to Minneapolis, my thinking went from clouded to bizarre. I thought I had killed a patient, and I thought the police were after me as a result. So we get to the airport the next night, and I'm thinking, the police are supposed to come and pick me up, and this plane shouldn't take off because I need to be arrested. But we got on the plane took off. So then I became convinced the plane was going to crash. And I kept saying it to my father sitting next to me, poor guy. And then by the time we landed in Minneapolis, it was like the world had come apart. And I thought there had been a nuclear war, and I thought I was the cause. So the next day when we got in to see my former advisor, he walked me straight down the hall to the locked psychiatric unit. I spent 2.5 months there, accompanied by a sitter on suicide watch. They gave me some medications that caused more side effects than benefit. And then finally, they offered me electroconvulsive therapy, sometimes known as shock therapy. You've seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But it's much better these days, and I said, I'm going to try anything at this point. So after the first treatment, I knew it was going to work. I felt my mood lift a bit, I felt more energy, and I had hope. So after 6 more treatments, I was doing well. I got out of the hospital. All I wanted to do was get back to Boston and resume my training. I was welcomed back by my fellow trainees and supervisors. I did not feel the same welcome from the Massachusetts Medical Licensing Board. When I went to renew my license, there was a question: have you been treated for a mental illness? I checked the box, yes. I filled out some details and sent it in. They called me in to meet with their director, and he said I would have to get a letter from a psychiatrist every month saying that I was fit to practice medicine. I didn't like that, but I just wanted to get back to my training and get on with it, and so I said, okay. Things went all right. Then the next year, I had to renew my license. And same question, same answer. This time, they called me into a meeting of the full board, the licensing board, and it was in a imposing room in a downtown Boston government building. I sat there for hours waiting for my case to be heard, and finally they called me up. The chair of the board, a woman, an attorney, said to me, Dr. Owen, if you had had the flu instead of major depression, would you be here today? I said no, and my license was granted with no more supervision. So that's a happy ending to the story, right? But for a long time, I couldn't tell anybody about my illness. I kept it hidden. After more than 10 years had passed, I started telling my closest friends about what had happened. I became more comfortable telling people after I joined the board of NAMI Arkansas, an organization that fights stigma. There, telling my story was expected and encouraged. I've been very lucky in my life. Although I have bipolar disorder, I have had excellent health care, I've had insurance to pay for that care, and I've had a supportive family. I'm a mental health advocate because I believe that getting good mental health care should not be a matter of luck. Everybody should be able to get care and feel comfortable getting it. I've learned in my life that telling my story lets other people know that there is help and hope.